So as you can see, I've done a bit more work on him. Just building upon what we had before. We've got these areas of the scarf here. We've got the bulk of the scarf which goes around his neck. We've also got his body. And I've also gone in and started to define where I want the stitches which are going to be across sort of the open wounds. And again, these stitches are just really basic shapes. If I just zoom in on this one here, you can see it's just a, if I turn off smooth mesh, it's just a cube. It's just a very basic cube, extruded, the shape adjusted and tweaked, duplicated, and then that's just repeated along the head. The same down here, that's just repeated along the lips. So nothing too taxing or complicated about that either. So there, we've got the body, we've got the scarf, the head, the eyes, so we're pretty much ready to think about UVing him. So the next point, the next thing we need to start thinking about is actually building the snake. So you may think that the snake wrapping around him is going to be quite time consuming, but there are quick ways to achieve this. Now you could create a curve and then extrude a shape along the spline, you know, get the shape that way. But what I'm going to do instead is just use another primitive, and this time I'm just going to use a helix. If I just pull this out in front, so as you can see, that's just given us that coil shape already. And then we can go in here and edit the actual properties of this. So the radius, maybe make that a little bit thinner. If we move this back, so it's around about the central point here. Move this up. So we know we want it wrapping around him, so we need to make it wider. So something like that will do. And we want to increase the amount of coils so it's actually going up his body. So maybe we want a couple more coils. One, two, three, four, five. So maybe we want 4 around him, but then we want, see this bit peeking around the back here, that's eventually going to come up. So now let's adjust the height, because we want this coming up his body. Something like that. And again, just tweaking the radius. Thicken that up. I'm just going to press 3, turn on smooth mesh. And the beauty of this is the geometry is already, you know, nicely laid out. The topology is quite uniform, so this will be nice for sculpting on. So let's adjust the width a bit more, just widen that up. Now we do want it wrapping around his body to look tight, but we can, again, we can sculpt that onto the body with the folds of the fabric. We move that up like so. So that's, so now we have to think about where we want this tail bit to go here before we sign this off as done. So let's say the tail goes at the back, because the back's not going to be seen, so we could tuck that underneath. So this bit here is a bit too long now, so let's just change these coil. Just adjust that so that it's not moving as quickly. So something like that should be fine. Let's just make it a little bit wider. Adjust the radius, I mean, just to bring those in together. So I'd say that's going to give us our basic basic shape. What we might actually do is at this stage see if we can reduce some of this topology just to make it a bit easier to work with in this initial stage. We can always add it back in, so let's just drop that to about 10. Now because we're going to be pulling all these points around and adjusting the shape of the snake, it's easier to work with less topology initially. I mean, we can always go back in and subdivide it later on, so it's not a big deal. So let's select the edge, and we want this to come flowing out behind him. So now we can go back into full screen view, press B, and we can use soft select just to adjust this like so, and we know we want it to come up and around and up, kind of like that. And while we're using soft select, we can also taper off the end of the tail as well, like so, just by scaling it. Now we will need to adjust these edges just to tidy it up a little bit. Let's just turn off soft select now. As you can see, we just need to adjust them so they follow the flow of the tail a little bit better. Well, I'm just going to undo that because the tail had flattened out. So let's adjust this now. And if we wanted a bit more control, we could always just taper it off one edge loop at a time. You know, that's just very rough. And now down here we just want to adjust the thickness of the tail around the bottom. So I'm just going to use soft selection again just to fatten that bottom lower tail up a little bit. Move that around like so, or move that out actually. And I can select that edge loop there. And now we're starting to play around with the shape of the snake just to give it a little bit more variety. And again, the tail can just be tucked underneath there, but if we look from the front, we're not actually going to see it. So we do want the bottom to be a bit more level though here, so because it's going to be sitting on the floor. So if we bring that down, we just scale that up a little bit as well. So as you can see, all we're doing is just adjusting and tweaking the topology using the soft select tool. And we could just go around and adjust the shape. You know, we're starting to get there now. So again, I'm just going to pause the video for a minute while I just carry on working on the snake and just get the shape that I want. So I will be back in a second. So here we go. I've continued to work on the snake, as you can see, just adjusting the shape. I've also added in just a simple bevel around these lower edges here, because that just sharpens off those bits and it sort of enhances the look of the snake and gives that sort of appearance that this is the underbelly, the sort of the underside of the snake. So let's just zoom out a little bit there. Turn off wireframe. So there we go, we're pretty much done with the modelling side of it. We do need to model the branches, but as you'll see when we start UVing in the next video, these are just basic shapes, and I'll just touch upon those in the in the next part. But for now, we're at a good stage where we've got a head, the scarf, the body, the snake. It's all quite low resolution, so that means that we'll be able to UV it quickly, and it also gives us a really good base to start sculpting and building upon. So what I'm going to do is just to end this video here, and then in the next one we'll bring everything into a scene. I'm going to work on the branches in between now and then, so I'll bring them all into one scene, and then we can start thinking about applying UVs.